Hey everybody, this is Rich and this is Beekeeping with Rich. Today you can call me Chef Rich because I'm going to prepare one of my favorite dishes for you. Damp sugar a la bee. We were having a bee meeting last night and a couple of people that I had turned on to this were thanking me for it and everybody else wanted to hear about it. So I decided that today was a good day to do a video on my damp sugar feeding methods for bees. And this is what you need to do it. 4-pound bag of sugar, a standing mixer preferably. You don't really want to sit there with a huge bowl and a wooden spoon stirring forever. This makes it very easy. A little bit of lemon juice, or alternately you can use some apple cider vinegar. I'll talk about that for a moment. And if you want a little bit of Honey Bee Healthy, great stuff, but use it in moderation, please, because it's real quick to get bees into a feeding frenzy and a robbing frenzy if they smell too much of that stuff around at one time. So at any rate, let's get started here. While I'm opening this up, I'll let you know it's February the 10th here in sunny South Florida. It's not that sunny at the moment. Temperature is about 81 degrees. Cold front came through the other day.
Weren't you going to tell them the difference between damp sugar and
Ah, that's true. Okay, first, let me talk about feeding dry sugar. Just dry sugar. I did that for a long time. To feed dry sugar, again, you can feed dry sugar in the in the rapid feeder on top of a Vivaldi shim. I'll show you that in a second. You can just put dry sugar in here, but here's an extremely necessary step. If you put dry sugar in, you have to spritz it down with a bottle of water. Failure to do that can lead to different consequences. I failed to do it one time, and I opened up it a few days later, and the bees were propolising the sugar. They didn't know what it was, so they were just going to propolis it and get it out of the way. Another time when I failed to spray the sugar, I came out the next day, and the bees had carefully carted every bit of it out the front door and dumped it on the ground. So if you don't dampen the sugar, they don't realize initially that it's a food source. Once they get that idea, they'll take the dry sugar behind it. Of course, in our high humidities down here, the dry sugar will start getting a little damp anyway. And by the same lights, if you don't want to invest in something like the rapid feeder, then you can just take a piece of newspaper, put it on top of your frames, but very necessary step again, spritz some water on it before you put the sugar down. And after you put the sugar down, please, a lot more than that, but I'm not going to waste my sugar right now. Spray it again. So if you want to experiment with this method, here's the way you experiment with the method. If you find out you like it, maybe you'll want to build a few of these Vivaldi shims and put sugar in. You do not use the inner cover. You just use the outer cover and the bees will come up and take it. But now we're going to talk about the damp sugar. This recipe, as it came to me, used apple cider vinegar, which I think is very healthy for the bees myself. The funny thing is, I've had other people tell me that they use apple cider vinegar sprayed on their cuffs and such to keep the bees away from their hands when they're working the bees. So I'm a little confused about that. Either way, the bees love a little bit of lemon juice. So 4-pound bag of sugar. Oh, by the way, a 4-pound bag of sugar is the perfect amount of sugar to mix with exactly 2 quarts of water to make a 1-to-1 syrup when you get to the point where you want to use some 1-to-1 syrup. My main use for 1-to-1 syrup is when I'm doing splits or cutouts or anything of that nature where you need to give the bees extra feed. Then you definitely want to go to a 1-to-1 sugar syrup. You don't want to be using dry sugar or anything like that. You want to make as little work for them as possible. The idea behind the damp sugar is that it makes a little more work for them. Right now we're in a period of time when something will come into bloom for 10 days and the bees are on it, and then there's nothing blooming for a few days and the bees will eat the sugar, and then something else comes into bloom and the bees are on that. I have a nephew who when
Can
I
you
was...
tell them that story while the thing's mixing?
Oh, I can, I guess.
That's better. You did it last time.
All right. So, to start with, 1/3 cup. 1/3 cup of water. 1/6 of a cup, that is half of this, full of lemon juice. Put down the mixer, turn it on, lock it down. Honey, be healthy. One teaspoon, no more, and I call it a scant teaspoon. I don't fill it all the way up. Just one scant teaspoon of Honey Bee Healthy at this time of year. I don't use Honey Bee Healthy in the fall. I don't use it in the wintertime. It can lead to too much robbing. A little is good. More is definitely going to lead to robbing. You don't want that. So as I was saying, I was explaining this to my nephew last night, and he came up with a wonderful analogy. He said, so it's like you have a job and you're eating well, and then you get laid off of your job, and you can survive on ramen noodles and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, but as soon as you have a job again, you're going to go back to eating better. It's like perfect analogy. It's there. You always got ramen noodles and peanut butter in the cabinet if you need them, but it's not what you want for your main diet, probably. Truth to tell,
The difference between sugar and syrup.
that's the difference between sugar water and the syrup, because the syrup, if things come back into bloom, but it's a lot more work for them, well, they'll just stay on the syrup. You know, and you really want them out there foraging and doing their thing and bringing back a good variety of nutritious nectars and pollens and such. And if you make it too easy for them in there, then they just might become, you know, housebound, I guess, for even your foragers. So, at any rate, you can either be stirring with a spoon in a big bowl, or you can do it the easy way with a standing counter mixer like this. Only takes a couple of minutes, and this will all be filled up. Now, dry sugar, my friends all said that this was much easier for them than using dry sugar, and I feel the same way. You can't make the mistake of forgetting to spritzing it with water when you do it this way, for one thing. It's easier to portion out and handle with a spoon. The bees understand it very well, and it lasts a whole lot longer than syrups do. It doesn't get cloudy, it doesn't get moldy, it stays, fresh, as it were. And the lemon juice begins the process of breaking down the sucrose into fructose and glucose. At least I feel that way. If you'll look at this month's edition, the February edition of the American Bee Journal, in Jamie Ellis's classroom section, he discusses this at some extent, and his conclusion is that he doesn't find any strong evidence that acidifying your nectar, that is your one-to-one syrup, or this makes any difference. But he likes to think it probably does, because obviously most nectars are acidic. Apparently there are some nectars that are fairly neutral, and even a couple that appear to be slightly alkaline, but for the most part, most nectars are acidic to one extent or another. And this just, I think, reflects a good mix, a good nutrient mix for the bees a lot better. So at any rate, this has been going long enough. Like I said, this is a quick video. Oh, release, up we go. There we go. Up and off. So if you're going to experiment with it this way, it's the same thing. You have a damp piece of newspaper. You could probably get away with not making a damp piece of newspaper. I keep in my bee closet some page dividers or notebook dividers, the thin plastic sheets. They're a perfect fit in the middle of a box like this. You can put it on there. They stick a little bit of propolis on the bottom side if you leave it on there long enough, if you do leave these on there for 3-4 weeks or whatever. But the bees don't have to waste their effort chewing up the newspaper and dragging it out, which is what they're going to do when you have newspaper in there like this. But you can just use newspaper if you just want to experiment with this one time and see how you like it. And of course, it's pretty much a no-brainer. You just heap the sugar in here. You don't have to take the feeder off of the hive or anything. You can picture this full of bees, and as long as you do it slowly, you can loosely bury the bee and he'll crawl right out with no problem, or she'll crawl right out with no problem. So no, just don't pack it in. Leave it loose and fluffy like that. It's amazing how often they'll come in and they will actually smooth it right out. They'll knock down all the tops. They'll make a nice level plane out of it, and they'll be feeding from there. They'll knock down the high parts first. So that's about it. Sugar, dry sugar versus damp sugar. I like damp sugar better. You're not carrying around a spritz bottle with you. You're not wrestling with newspaper if you're doing it that way. Well, you are dealing with newspaper if you're going to put it on that way. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. But that's the recipe, and it works really well in the early spring before you really want to start the buildup. There is about a month usually before spring buildup is really going to start happening, and you really want them to start putting out those, making all that extra brood. But they may be light on resources from the winter. But they're flying, they're out. There may not be much for them to collect in other parts of the country, just down here for different reasons. But damp sugar is a wonderful food source to insert in that short period of time before you really want them to start building up for the spring, but when they're coming out of their winter quarters. So that's it for this video. Everyone have a great evening, and have fun with your bees. Bye-bye.